when it comes to Saylor, what do you think the next moves are for him?
I could see them essentially being the bank of the future. They hold all this Bitcoin. They're continually acquiring more and more. It's widely recognized as a pristine form of collateral in the future. They have all their instruments are rated, and they're creating different products for different audiences. And again, another chapter in the book is talking about Rockefeller, how Standard Oil kind of built this empire where one core commodity, crude oil, and then they're refining it at different levels for different groups and different applications. So again, parallel to history, they are the Bitcoin refinery and the Bitcoin bank. That's my take.
Anil, welcome to the Bitcoin Collective. How are you doing?
Good, thanks, Jordan. Thanks for the invitation. Excited to have a chat.
Yeah, likewise. I was just saying before we jumped on that I've followed you for a while and your work for a while, and it's been a lot of help to me. I think a lot of Bitcoiners would agree that a lot of your visuals that you have made have helped them as tools to helping orange pill other Bitcoiners. So yeah, it's great to have you on, and we'll go through all of this.
Yeah, cheers. I appreciate that. And just to be clear, I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? I benefited from the works of some awesome Bitcoiners too. So yeah, everyone keeps passing it on, as you are now.
Yeah, and do your bit. Exactly. So let's get into, I want to go a little bit further back and look at your background first. And could you tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today? Feel free to add in as much detail as possible.
Yeah. So I jumped around quite a lot before eventually finding Bitcoin. I was in the music industry in Australia. Then I worked in education, public education. Then I worked at a startup. So I'd done a bunch of different things, and nothing really, I guess, captured my interest as much as Bitcoin eventually would. And so, something I always recommend to people if they're looking to kind of break into the Bitcoin space or maybe find a job within Bitcoin is to kind of just document your own learning journey publicly. Kind of build a portfolio in public of what you know and your skills, what you can add. And you will find that if you keep doing that consistently and you get better over time, opportunities will come your way. And that's probably the most foolproof way to break in. And so that's what I did. Just started posting all the educational material I was consuming and then refining, putting back out there. And I was lucky to get to work for a number of companies in the Bitcoin space, from Swan to Unchained to Bitcoin Magazine. And then after that, I was quite active as an angel investor. So I'm an investor in about a dozen Bitcoin-related companies. And again, from there, I kind of built up a lot of educational assets, I suppose. And it was just time to start putting them into books, because that's what I wanted to consume. I wanted to create the books that didn't yet exist. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am now.
That's really great to hear. I like that you said build in public and document your journey. I think that's really, it's important and it's also scary at the same time, because I could really relate when you said that. That's the whole reason I started a podcast, was to document the journey of, and it has been quite interesting because the podcast started as the crypto standard back in 2020. And you will then, throughout the 205 episodes, 206 episodes, you'll then see my journey of crypto moving to Bitcoin to only Bitcoin, and that's all we really talk about. So it's really interesting that you say that document your journey and actually put it out there. And that's great to hear. And I don't think enough people actually do that.
Yeah. And that's like a pretty common path of going crypto, trying to make sense of it, and you end up at Bitcoin if you're lucky, so give yourself credit. Not many people do, right? But then people will start asking, okay, well, why is it? What fundamental change happened within you, or what did you understand that other people haven't yet? So yeah, kudos to you.
Yeah, it's when did that for you? Let's not look at Bitcoin at the moment, but when did you realize potentially there was something wrong with the money that we were using today? Or did that go in tandem with learning about Bitcoin?
Yeah, so I very, very early on of the e-commerce days, I was running a online business when I was in high school, and I dealt with PayPal as it kind of first got integrated into eBay. So this was kind of like the first digital payments network that wasn't connected to a bank or a credit card specifically. And I think I must have been, 13, 14, 15 at the time. I could not get a credit card, but I had a profitable business with cash flow. And on paper, I would have been an ideal candidate to receive credit so I could purchase more inventory and scale. PayPal was one of the first companies to actually start offering the sellers on eBay credit, because they didn't need to know anything about me. They just needed to look at my business. So that was a really interesting turning point for me of thinking, the future is probably going to be more permissionless and less based on a checklist of, KYC and certain rules and regulations. And then there's also, unfortunate stories of you would get your PayPal account frozen for, incorrect infraction, say, which, we kind of see our friends getting strikes on YouTube for, violations they didn't necessarily commit, or they're just unfairly targeted. So when you have that happen to you early on as a kid, it makes you a lot more conscious of how the financial system works and maybe the risks that most people don't realize. So I was pretty lucky that primed me for when I did get introduced to Bitcoin. To be fair, I completely mistook it as just a payments technology, of just a way to move money around, not necessarily a way to store value. That came much, much later. But the appeal of a permissionless network was there for me from day one.
Am I allowed to ask what the business was at 13?
Initially, it was actually a ticket brokerage. But then I eventually would work in the music industry, and that's not something I wanted to do. Selling tickets to events that your boss was promoting. So, but I over time became like the e-commerce person in my neighborhood, and everyone from neighbors to school teachers to people at the local grocery store would give me their stuff to sell for them. So it's great learning experience. Yeah,
that's really interesting. So you saw Bitcoin as more of a payments technology to begin with. When did the pieces all start to get put in place for you around Bitcoin?
Yeah, I guess it was more reading the work of people who kind of were very early to Bitcoin. Like I love a lot of Pierre Rochard's essays. If you think of one of his most famous ones is Speculative Attack, and he wrote that more than a decade ago, and we're only seeing that play out now. So they were very prescient. So yeah, the more I read about Bitcoin from quality sources, that people and sources I would now call like canonical, you start to see how Bitcoin compares to, say, central banking, which was a term I was completely unfamiliar with. And, from there, you sort of study previous monetary systems throughout history and in different parts of the world. And you start asking questions. Okay, what is hyperinflation? How does that occur? How susceptible is where I live to something like that playing out? And then, over time, you realize we're all on the same curve. We're just at different points in the same journey. So, yeah, it just clicked over time.
Did you have an interest in, so from my perspective, it wasn't for Bitcoin. I wouldn't really be learning about economics and energy systems, and the rabbit holes that it takes you down are vast.
Yep.
What did you have an interest in any of that before Bitcoin, or was Bitcoin the gateway to a lot of that?
I'd always been interested in markets in general. From running online businesses to, I worked on the ticketing side of live events with promoters and venues at quite a large scale. And seeing the transition from going from physical paper tickets at a box office to digital tickets sold online, and watching the market kind of get comfortable with that shift, you realize the direction it's going. And in my opinion, the first example of digital scarcity was actually when concert tickets went digital. Because if you take your average arena, 15,000 seats, 15,000 barcodes that will gain entry into that, and they could be transacted peer-to-peer, permissionlessly, because now it kind of happens on the same platform that the tickets are sold, but in the past, you could sell them however you like. So that was a great, example for me of, okay, well, what if you had an instrument just like this, but it didn't have an expiration date like a concert ticket does, because the event happens and then, that becomes worthless. So yeah, the idea of a instrument you can trade peer-to-peer, it's digital. Exchanges can pop up anywhere on earth to facilitate those transfers. The market price of that instrument is going to be the most or the highest integrity instrument of anything out there, because it's constantly getting this feed of real-time transactions all over the world. So it's, Bitcoin's just magic in that regard. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is. So is Bitcoin now your sole focus? And is that pretty much everything that you do is revolving around that?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of, reading biographies and reading history. And it becomes pretty clear that you don't necessarily have to be the smartest person in your field, but you want to get the general trend correct. So if you can get the main trend or transformation correct, you want to be a part of that. It doesn't matter how, doesn't matter, in what capacity, or if you're leading or you're lagging, but you want to be on the same train. So it's definitely my focus. It's, the highest use of my time now is just educating others about Bitcoin, and helping them, protect and preserve their wealth over time.
What sparked you to, so the Bitcoin Handbook, I think that was probably one of the first times that I came across you, and all the visuals that are in there and the explainers, and I'd highly recommend to anyone that is listening to go and check it out, just because the way that my question is, did you know that you had, I will say, a talent for distilling these complex subjects down into something digestible before you set about making this?
No, absolutely not. So I have no business writing books at all. This is where the Bitcoin community is fantastic. If you have a thick skin and you're able to take feedback on. So I kept hearing terms like, thermodynamics, opportunity cost, Gresham's law from people smarter than me. They would mention them on a podcast or at a conference or in an essay. And every time I'd come across these terms, call them concepts, call them mental models, frameworks, what have you. And, I just think, oh crap, there's something I don't know. And I would just compile a list of all these terms and try to look them up. And then I realized how many other successful people constantly lean on these same concepts as like the foundational base of all their other knowledge. And so I was trying to figure out ways to contribute to Bitcoin education. So I started a newsletter, and each week I would just tackle a new mental model, kind of try to explain it as succinctly as possible with the target audience of someone like my own mum or mother-in-law in mind. They should be able to understand this. It doesn't have to be complicated. And I hit a threshold where people just started bugging me. They're like, hey, this newsletter is great and all, but can you just put them all in a book? That would be way easier. I'll pay for it in advance, So I had all these pre-orders for a book I didn't even know I was going to write. And then a Bitcoin publisher got involved and everything just fell into place. I was very fortunate. It was just great timing. There's no reason it should have been me, but it just worked out that way. And, that book's now in 10 languages or so. Again, thanks to other Bitcoiners around the world who are like, hey, I will translate this for you. Can I do that as a project? So, it's just a great example of how much opportunity there is in this space if you're willing to work for it.
Yeah. And I guess it's that proof of work as well. And like another example, like Joe Bryan's, a good friend of mine, and his What's the Problem video. But when you're talking about translation, that's been translated into, I don't even know how many languages now. But that was done through community. People reaching out and saying, oh, I want to translate this. And I just remember the amount of people that reached out saying the same thing. They just want to help when there's something that's really valuable, but they see as valuable as a tool for them to help educate others. They will go out their way to make sure that is as easily accessible as possible.
Yeah, it's incredible.
In the handbook, is there a particular concept framework that you're most proud of? Because whenever I think of it, there's a few, which I'll name after, but I want to hear what yours are.
Yeah, and again, these aren't like my concepts. A lot of them I've taken from other places. A lot of Bitcoiners were early to identify them. There's maybe, I'll give you two that kind of I think are important. One is winner take all markets. So if you can understand which markets will naturally end up with just one dominant winner, it'll save you a lot of time and pain because you won't be, diversifying or buying a basket of, competitors hoping that one will win. You can just identify who the winner is at a certain threshold and, kind of go all in there because you know that particular company, asset, what have you, is going to capture the market. So that's really helpful. The other one is a concept called Gell-Mann amnesia. And the name's not too important. It's like Michael Crichton, a great author, coined it about one of his friends, Murray Gell-Mann. But the whole point of this concept is if you know a lot about Bitcoin, I'm just using Bitcoin as an example, it could be any topic. But if you know a lot about Bitcoin and you pick up, Times of London, Wall Street Journal, you're flicking through the BBC, what have you, and you see them do a segment on Bitcoin or an article on Bitcoin, and you recognize some clear errors in the reporting, things that are just factually incorrect. Well, now you can assume that everything else that they report on is going to have a similar error rate. And our tendency as humans is we will flick through a newspaper, we'll find errors in the subject matter that we're experts in. We'll think, oh, that's incorrect. And then we'll flip to the next page, completely different subject, and just consume it as if it's all correct. So it's a really good heuristic for just filtering out like 95% of your information diet.
That's really interesting. It's making me think I need a refresher. Because I read it when it first came out. I'm going to have to go back through it. But that's the beauty of it. It's something that you can just go back through it and just find different pages, which is what I really liked about it. Because I remember as well coming into the space as a whole and not knowing anything and just hearing all of these words. Then you did back in the day, I'm saying about 6 and 7 years ago, you didn't really have ChatGPT, and it was a lot harder to actually research a lot of this stuff, get good examples, and have it written in a way that's easily digestible. But one of the visuals that you created that I use quite a lot is the monetary premium one, because I think that's a really important one and for everyone who's watching on YouTube, I'll put it on the screen. But it's a really important one for people to understand, and it's something that's not widely understood in day-to-day life, unfortunately. And you can really relate Bitcoin to that, especially looking at it with real estate, and even just having that visual of the utility value and the monetary premium really helps. I'm a very visual person, so I need these things.
Yeah, and that's a concept that I found most useful to kind of understanding Bitcoin's total addressable market in the future. Because once you understand Bitcoin and you think, oh, here's this kind of perfect piece of digital property, and then you walk out into the world and you're looking around and you're like, where is all the rest of the capital in the world? Where is it sitting? Where is it nested? And, if you understand the concept of monetary premium, then when housing is appreciating faster than wages or, government inflation data, it just makes perfect sense. You understand that all this money is being printed. It must go somewhere. It's going to go where it's treated best. And in certain jurisdictions, it just happens to be real estate as an asset class. So it's just a very easy way to look, a helpful way to look at the world and spot where there are inefficiencies, basically.
Yeah, and I think also that's what most people are used to storing their wealth in. I think that's the important thing. That's how I was brought up, was you would go to school, go to university, get married, buy a house, have kids. And the buy a house was always in there, and that was the way of storing your value. And a lot of people will then build portfolios off the back of that and buy rental properties. So it's really relatable, and it's meeting people where they are and how they understand store of value currently, and what could actually happen to those stores of value as we see Bitcoin come into the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. I did a podcast earlier this morning, and it was with a real estate firm who have become big proponents of Bitcoin now, because they're kind of identifying or looking at these two different assets, looking at the characteristics, and thinking, oh, actually, this digital version that I can self-custody and is divisible and portable and can store in any jurisdiction actually might be better than this. So now they're going back to the fundamental question of, why does anyone want to be an investor or a real estate investor? Is it because you're actually genuinely passionate about real estate and you love looking through, assessing cash flows and building models? Well, for 95% of people who own real estate as an investment, that's not the case. They're just looking for the most, leveraged opportunity to gain exposure to an inflating currency.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with Leon. Do you know Leon Wankum? And
Yeah, great work.
Yeah, fantastic work. And yeah, it was such a good discussion around that. I actually think, thinking back, I think we actually brought your graphic up on the screen during the podcast. And yeah, it was really interesting conversation on even about bringing beauty back into real estate and property again, which is something I think we've lost.
Which, when you understand the fiat system and the unfortunate effects of it, it makes sense why we live in a fairly bland world when your time preference is so high. So if you can make the connection between quality of money and the quality of your environment, things make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Right. Let's get on to the Treasury of Michael Saylor. I've got so many questions around this. First off, could you tell us a little bit about the book? And then we'll get into the why you wrote it.
Yeah, so the book is a collection of Michael's interview transcripts, analogies, certain lessons he's kind of told over time in different formats and tweets. And then I made a bunch of visuals to accompany that, curated it all, got it down to a couple hundred pages, and it kind of just explains his whole journey of going from I'm running a company, sitting on $500 million of cash, watching it melt away. Now, what do I do? Okay, that leads him on to a journey of fundamentally like looking at what money is, what wealth is, where is it stored in the world, what are the pros and cons of each. And he's kind of going through this checklist, settles on Bitcoin, and then kind of has some predictions about the future. So that's kind of the book in a nutshell. And, something that's maybe not as appreciated is he wrote a book in 2012 called Mobile Wave, where he lays out the thesis of we now have this digital network in the internet. We have smartphone adoption, clearly going to reach a saturation point. There are going to be these dominant networks that emerge in each of these applications. So he wrote that, over a decade ago. It played out almost perfectly. He was absolutely correct. So when you go back and read that, you understand how well primed he was to grok Bitcoin, even though initially he had some skepticism. But in my opinion, it was always going to be him who did what he did. So it's very interesting to me.
It's so interesting. This is something I've talked about as well, quite a lot on the podcast, because I read the book, his Mobile Wave, years ago. And the one thing that I noticed is the language that he used. I don't know if you noticed the same, but it's very similar. Like he will use similar terminology that he used back then towards a different technology as he does today with Bitcoin. And it's like you're almost just taking out a word and just putting a new word in, Bitcoin. Did you notice this as well?
Yes, absolutely. They're very well spotted, by the way. I don't know how people recognize that. And it goes back to the kind of overarching point that, people don't change. It's just the technology that changes over time. So we go through the same adoption cycles, the same cycles of critics, decrying something new, entrenched interests trying to fight it, governments trying to ban it, and then adoption, people underestimating it. So again, it's nothing new. Bitcoin's nothing new in terms of technology going through a process of adoption. It's just pattern recognition for him. So he uses, you're right, he uses a lot of the same terminology because it's a lot of the same playbook. And he's been a public company CEO, or now he's a chairman, but for about 3 decades. So he's had a lot of training in communication, media and PR. And I think you're just seeing someone who's just very well refined at that skill now. And lucky for us, his attention is on Bitcoin.
Yeah. Why did you write the book? I would really like to know, what made you land on writing this book?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. The idea came about, if you're familiar with Eric Jorgensen's book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant.
I know it, but I've not read it.
So Naval is quite a well-known angel investor on the West Coast here in North America. And he kind of put all of his principles and philosophies, or Eric did, basically put them into a book, and it's done exceptionally well. It's like a lot of wisdom condensed with some accompanying visuals, kind of like this new format for a pseudo biography. And I love the book. I love the format of it. I love the lessons. I love that I can reread it and I'll learn something new, rereading the same passage, a couple of years apart. And when I had enough content that I'd been collecting of Michael's and creating enough visuals, I realized, there's probably enough content for a book. And it was when Michael actually stated once that, he wrote The Mobile Wave, nobody read it. And if he ever saw the same trend or opportunity, he wasn't going to write another book. He was just going to go and buy as much of it as he possibly could in a personal capacity and in a corporate capacity, which he's done. So those two things together kind of clicked for me. And I thought, well, I'm going to write the book. I want to own that book. So that kind of set me on a journey for about 12 to 18 months.
And was Michael involved in any of the process? Or is it just purely from the outside looking in?
So yeah, I obviously early on ran the idea past him, told him, look, I've got this idea. I want to make this resource. And, could I make it I'll make the digital version free, because he's a big believer in, free education as well. And he said, sure. He gave me kind of the green light. So I worked on it, and I was very regularly posting samples on Twitter just to kind of get a feel is this going to click with the audience? Is this like a useful lesson? Is it not? And over time, I kind of figured out which lessons seem to be key to people's understanding of Bitcoin, its role as a treasury asset. And then, obviously, I'd met him a few times during the process, but he had no input into what made it into the book, what got cut out, zero input in that regard. And then I just kind of ran the final manuscript past him. So he wasn't involved in that sense. And I made sure I pulled everything from the book from like public sources. So anyone can kind of take a section of the book, go find the original source or interview that's publicly available and go watch it themselves. Because I didn't want there to be any confusion over the context of his words. So, he wasn't deeply involved at all, really, other than kind of giving me permission to do it. Oh, just lost your sound.
Had it on mute, sorry. Was there anything that really stood out to you as you were going through all of this research and doing all these hours on this one person? Because it must be quite a cool experience at the same time for you as the author of just being able to deep dive on one person and one concept around what he's been doing. Was there anything that like stood out to you as you didn't know that about him, or something that just really you always think about that stood out?
Yeah. So look, Michael and I, our first interaction would have been on Twitter around 2020, as he's sort of learning about Bitcoin, and they made their first the pre-purchase announcement almost of, we have this intention to potentially acquire Bitcoin. It was very clear then he's kind of doing all his research. He's reading all the articles, all the books, listening to a lot of podcasts, going down his own rabbit hole. And so I only knew post Bitcoin Michael, right? So when working on the book, to be going back kind of deeper into his career, 10, 20, 30 years back, that's when it got really interesting, because you look at his path and he just became more and more interesting as an individual. And, the more I would see him being underestimated in the public eye today. Apologies. Hold on, I'm just going to switch my headphones.
No worries.
Oh, actually, that should be clear. You can hear me all right?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, apologies.
Okay.
The more and more I went back into, his history, the more I could see as being underestimated today, in the sense that he would be criticized for a particular action or angle or perspective. And you realize, no, he already learned this lesson very painfully 20 years ago. He knows what he's doing. So that was definitely interesting to me. Someone who lost a vast majority of his net worth in his 30s, and people are telling him today, you're taking too much risk. You're going to get, liquidated. You're going to lose everything. And you realize, he's already lived that painful experience. This is not his first rodeo. He's not going to repeat the same mistakes, right? He has kind of this engineering mindset of, you try something, if it doesn't work, you iterate. You don't go back and, try the same failed strategy. So yeah, I always err on the side of he's being underestimated rather than overestimated.
It's so interesting. Just doing that deep dive on just one person. And obviously August 2020, when he made that, I think it was August 2020, when he made that announcement, and they moved their balance sheet from cash into Bitcoin. What do you think's the most today? What do you think's the most misunderstood thing about putting Bitcoin on your balance sheet? Just from the Bitcoin Collective standpoint, we work with private companies on showing them why companies do this and helping them how do you actually do it. From your perspective, doing such a deep dive on the corporate level, what do you think is the most misunderstood thing about what he's actually building?
There are two pieces to it, I guess. The first being, they're in an iterative process. They started off with these convertible bonds, pivoted again. So they were just error correcting the whole time till they found what would be the ultimate best strategy to accumulate Bitcoin in a creative way. So, it's very easy to criticize them at any point in time for pursuing, the incorrect strategy. And I don't think they, as a company, are too phased by that. I think they just see it as part of the process of, we're the first company to do this. There's going to be missteps. We're learning. We're going to do it in the most responsible way possible that we can. So there are going to be bumps along the way. That's, I think, part of the process, and they know it. The second part is, you can't just blindly copy another company. You were talking about different jurisdictions, different capital markets, different operating businesses, different management teams. There's just such variety that, any company looking to adopt Bitcoin, the primary reason should be that firstly, you create value. So you're generating positive cash flow. And then, if you're able, you don't need that for the long term. Yeah, Bitcoin might be the best method to store those long-term savings, which is no different to if you're an individual, if you're a charity, if you're a community group. It's the same premise of just how do you save in something long-term with certainty and increase your purchasing power over time.
It's interesting. Actually, one of the examples I use, and feel free, I'm going to give you authority to tell me if this isn't good or you wouldn't use it. So I might look silly at the end of this. But one of the examples that I like to use, just to make it a little bit more relatable to people, of what is happening when businesses are holding Bitcoin on their balance sheet, I tend to use McDonald's as an example around them buying up real estate. And I think they've got over $40 billion, $45 billion of Bitcoin. I know, not Bitcoin, of real estate. I wish it was Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And this seems to relate to people quite a lot of, okay, they're holding something that is increasing and not getting hit by just holding it in cash. Purchasing power is going down. They're actually investing it in a vehicle that was seen as one of the normal and biggest investment that you would make pre-Bitcoin. And that's how McDonald's have lasted decades and coming up for century, actually. I think in about 10 years, maybe a bit less. But this seems to land quite well with people. And then you can go on to the Bitcoin angle of how that's changed with investing in real estate and Bitcoin. That wasn't a great way of explaining. I usually do a better job than that.
I absolutely get what you mean. Yeah. And it's just recognizing that different asset classes are monetized during different generations. Like look at our parents' generation, what would have been the asset class that their parents told them was, kind of the safe and reliable thing. Maybe back then it was government bonds. Next generation, it's real estate. And it's just different things being monetized or being prioritized based on the incentives around them. Like, of course, if you've got 40 years of a downtrend in real interest rates, yeah, there's probably going to be a pretty obvious choice in that regard. But recognizing that those, coveted asset classes change with generations. They do go through that transition, and then thinking about, okay, what's the next one? What are our children likely to hold, or what will they benefit from holding based on all the other institutions around them? That's the hard thing about telling businesses they should hold Bitcoin today, is a lot of the products and services that Bitcoiners know will exist in the future maybe don't quite exist today. So in the last couple of days, you've seen JP Morgan in the US saying some of their institutional clients will be able to use Bitcoin as collateral for loans. Okay, that's a pretty big tick in the Bitcoiner thesis. You have Strategy having some of their products rated by S&P. Again, something we kind of knew would happen. So it is happening. It's just it's difficult to tell businesses to do something when the benefits aren't immediately there just yet.
Yeah, it's the difficult thing of as a Bitcoiner trying not to say "I told you so" because that's not helpful. But yeah, all of these things, it's hard to imagine a world, the future, and like that's the difficult thing of, if you said 20 years ago you'd be able to pay for your groceries in the shop by just looking at your phone, everyone would look at you like you're mental. And by looking back at these historic technologies that we've actually been through, and the process, as you were talking about, the process, they're all the same, but just applied to something else. What do you think, when it comes to Saylor, what do you think the next moves are for him?
Hard to say. And again, I don't have any inside knowledge of what's going to happen or what they're going to do. He had mentioned, and this is a chapter in the book from an interview he gave once, where he kind of talks about, there's only room for one Bitcoin bank. And it kind of ties into his thesis of dominant digital networks, of, how Apple kind of took their vertical, Amazon took their vertical, they all kind of carved out and dominated a particular area. So, if I kind of take those words to heart, of that there's only room for one Bitcoin bank, going back to winner take all as a concept, I could see them essentially being the bank of the future. They hold all this Bitcoin. They're continually acquiring more and more. It's widely recognized as a pristine form of collateral in the future. They have all their instruments are rated, and they're creating different products for different audiences. And again, another chapter in the book is talking about Rockefeller, how Standard Oil kind of built this empire where one core commodity in crude oil, and then they're refining it at different levels for different groups and different applications. So again, parallel to history, they had the Bitcoin refinery and the Bitcoin bank. That's my take.
Yeah, amazing. It's I would highly recommend to anyone checking out all of your work, because it's the way that you distill stuff, I think, is the magic. And I will put all of the links to all of your work down below in the description below. But my last question is, what's next for you? Are you allowed to reveal anything? Are you working on a new book or anything like that?
Not yet. So a priority right now is getting all the translations out. So obviously, there's multiple companies attempting multiple strategies in multiple jurisdictions. This is not a phenomena that's, specific to the US. And I'm sure more and more businesses, public and private, will adopt Bitcoin as a treasury asset in different capacities. So yeah, there's been a lot of interest from different markets to have a native language version of the book. So yeah, over the next few months, there's currently about 6 or 7 in the works, which kind of surprised me at how much demand there was for this, because everyone's having the same problem, right? They're having to try to explain why Bitcoin makes sense as a reserve asset across different markets. So yeah, right now that is the main focus.
Yeah, brilliant. And that's the Treasury of Michael Saylor. That is who everyone looks to for this. And you're right, it's not just one jurisdiction. It doesn't really matter where you are in the world. Like, strategy are the biggest and likely to remain the biggest. So for people to actually understand what's going on here, it makes sense to read the Treasury of Michael Saylor.
Yeah, and that's the other key point, is it doesn't matter what your opinion of him or the company is, or Bitcoin even is. If you have any remote interest in finance, capital markets, public markets, whatever, it's worth understanding this. This is going to impact you.
Yeah, 100%. And we're at the beginning of this as well, of companies. So we're getting inundated with private companies asking, how do we do this? Which is fantastic.
A good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have. And we're frantically trying to figure out how to actually help all of these companies. And then you've got the public companies as well. There's a lot of them popping up, and it feels like it's just the beginning of people understanding what's actually going on here.
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily a Bitcoin phenomena. It's just, companies are recognizing there's a better way to store their wealth. They're just upgrading the software on their savings in a way. And, the sooner you are to make the shift, the better off you'll be relative to your competitors. So there's this game theory aspect to it.
100%. And it's all these businesses realizing they have a problem. with holding cash long term. I think that's the big thing, because that's what we're seeing, is that understanding of course, there's no point talking about Bitcoin to begin with. They need to understand what the problem is. And if you look at the problem in the Great British Pound, it's lost, I think, just over 21% of its purchasing power in the last 5 years.
Okay.
And to be able to tell a business that, they're like, oh, okay, I've got a problem because I've been holding cash for 5 years. So it's now the ability to do that, but then also the fact that Bitcoin is there and you can dollar cost average in, which wasn't quite as easy with other assets prior.
Yeah. And you look at some of the products and services that are out there today, the work that Square's doing with all their merchants across the US, and having the option to retain some of your earnings in Bitcoin or all of them in Bitcoin if you want. You look at the long-term implications of that. Say you go 5 years out, let's say hypothetically, Bitcoin 3-4x's. Well, those businesses are in a much better position relative to their peers. So then, do they go out and acquire some of their competitors? Do they, engage in underpricing? Like it's going to get really interesting a couple of cycles from now, in terms of seeing how the businesses that adopted Bitcoin today compare to their peers.
So interesting, and it just gives you a competitive advantage. Is our next conference, which is only 2 weeks away, is called Bitcoin: A Competitive Advantage, and it's bringing a group of business owners that are doing this, public and private, together with businesses that are curious, how do we actually do this? So yeah, in the next 5 years, it'll be very interesting to see the difference between those who learn about it and figure out what's happening and gain that competitive advantage versus those that don't.
Yeah, that's a great title for an event, by the way. That's great framing, because it's not necessarily about Bitcoin. It's just how do you compare to your competitors? Yeah,
exactly. And we've got a bit about AI in there as well, because that's another important aspect of integrating into your business. But yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for jumping on and joining me. It was great to have you on the podcast after reading so much of your stuff, and you also using it as a tool to help educate other Bitcoiners. So I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, cheers, Jordan. Great to finally meet and have a chat. And yeah, thanks for all the work you're doing, right? It's, I think a lot of the fruits of your labor will be, you'll receive them in the future from helping businesses understand Bitcoin, because in the process, for some businesses, you're literally saving the business. The business would not continue to exist did it not, make this shift. So yeah, kudos to you.
Thank you. And yeah, hopefully I'll have you on the podcast again at some point, and yeah, we can dive into this a little bit more.
Yeah, anytime. Sounds good.
Awesome.